And he turned around and said he regretted that, because the reality is you're working on that sort of basis.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning, it's 9:30. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK with Andrew Pierce and Bev Turner.
Is in Brighton this morning at the TUC conference. We've got a lot to get through between now and midday. Criminals freed early. Thousands of prisoners are going to be let out of prison today in a bid to tackle the overcrowding crisis in our jails. We've already seen some of them emerging live on GB News this morning. We're also going to be talking about the winter fuel vote. There are going to be several Labour MPs, it could be as many as 50, who will abstain from the vote today. Are they cowards? And Trump versus Harris, the US presidential candidates will face off in their first debate ahead of the election in November. And the Lucy Letby inquiry begins, the public inquiry into how the crimes of the killer nurse were able to happen in the NHS will start today. And of course, we had yesterday evening the Royal Health update. Great news. Princess of Wales has finished her chemotherapy treatment and said that her focus is to stay cancer-free.
Morning to you. I'm live in the Brighton Conference Centre for the TUC conference. This is the first one to be addressed by a Labour Prime Minister since 2009, when Gordon Brown spoke in Liverpool. Huge expectation, huge excitement, because Keir Starmer will be speaking around 11 o'clock. We'll be here live to bring you all that and much more from TUC in Brighton.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We'd love to hear from you, of course. gbnews.com/your say. What is your response to the Princess of Wales announcing that she's well? And that very cinematic video, that felt like a little change in royal communications, didn't it? And of course, we're going to be hearing from Keir Starmer this morning, as Andrew said at the TUC conference. What will you make of his statements down there? First, though, the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Bev, thank you, and good morning to you. It's just after 9:30, and the top story of the day: around 1,700 prisoners in England and Wales are being released early today as the government attempts to tackle overcrowding in jails. The prison's watchdog is warning some released prisoners may reoffend or end up homeless because of what they're calling inadequate preparation. But despite concerns from victims and charities, Downing Street's defending the move, saying it's vital to prevent unchecked criminality causing a lack of space in jails. Sex offenders, though, terrorists and those convicted of serious violent crimes are excluded from the scheme. MPs are set to vote later on a controversial government plan to remove winter fuel payments for most pensioners. It's being defended by Labour as a tough decision to address a £22 billion deficit, and will see around 10 million people lose up to £300 in support. Critics, including some Labour MPs, warn it would force pensioners to choose between heating and eating this winter. But the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, argues the move is necessary to fix public finances after what she's calling reckless Conservative spending. The Foreign Secretary will meet America's top diplomat, Antony Blinken, in London later for strategic talks aimed at boosting the special relationship between the two nations. The discussions will focus on deepening economic and security ties, ongoing support for Ukraine, and promoting peace in the Middle East. Ahead of those talks, David Lammy reiterated the UK's bond with the US, calling it our greatest friendship and a vital in volatile world. The public inquiry into the crimes of convicted child killer nurse Lucy Letby begins today at Liverpool Town Hall. The investigation will scrutinise how Letby, now serving 15 life sentences, was able to murder and to harm babies at the Countess of Chester Hospital despite repeated warnings to hospital bosses. The inquiry will also focus on the experiences of the victims' families, the actions of hospital staff and the broader role of the NHS. This week, opening statements will be heard, with evidence expected to continue until December. We've heard this morning that pensioners could see a boost of £460 to their state pension next April, with the full rate set to rise to more than £11,900 a year. That increase comes under the triple lock guarantee, with wage growth at 4% driving that change, according to the Office for National Statistics. And while it's welcome news for many, experts are warning that rise may still fall short for those losing winter fuel payments and edges the state pension closer to the personal tax allowance. Well, meanwhile, news this morning that wage growth has slowed and unemployment's dropped slightly down to 4.1%, but job vacancies continue to fall. And finally, news from the Middle East. At least 40 people have been killed and 60 wounded in an Israeli airstrike on a camp for displaced Palestinians in southern Gaza. Reports suggest that tents were hit by multiple missiles early this morning, sparking fires and leaving deep craters, some as wide as 9 metres. Israel has confirmed the strike, targeting what it described as a Hamas command centre. But the terror group have condemned the attack as a brutal act of genocide, and they are calling it a violation of international law. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you in half an hour. Now, though, back to Bev and Andrew in Brighton.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
9:36. Good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom. I am here in London, of course, in the GBNews studio. Andrew Pearce is at the TUC conference in Brighton. Morning, Andrew. What are you expecting down there this morning?
Good morning. Well, we're not supposed to say this, but of course I'm going to anyway. It is the Prime Minister going to be speaking around 11 o'clock this morning. Bev, huge anticipation and excitement about that. The first Labour Prime Minister to address a TUC conference since 2009, when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, and that took place in Liverpool. And remember, the trade unions have been waiting a long time for a Labour government. They've got a big shopping list of demands to do with a 4-day week, greater working rights. They want a lot of the Tory trade union laws reformed. So there's huge anticipation. But I have to tell you also, there's a lot of anger here about the issue which is going to be put to the Commons vote this afternoon, which is, of course, the winter fuel allowance. They think pensioners are being unfairly punished by Labour. But, of course, there's all those trade unions who have done very well already out of the Labour government, the train drivers, the teachers, the doctors.
OK, all right, Andrew, we'll be back with you in just a little while. But we're moving on now because the Princess of Wales, of course, announced the completion of chemotherapy in a cinematic movie that was posted to Instagram. Here it is.
As the summer comes to an end, I cannot tell you what a relief it is to have finally completed my chemotherapy treatment. The last 9 months have been incredibly tough for us as a family. Life as you know it can change in an instant, and we've had to find a way to navigate the stormy waters and road unknown. The cancer journey is complex, scary and unpredictable for everyone, especially those closest to you. With humility, it also brings you face to face with your own vulnerabilities in a way you've never considered before. And with that, a new perspective on everything.
Is this filming?
Hello? Hello?
This time has above all reminded William and me to reflect and be grateful for the simple yet important things in life, which so many of us often take for granted, of simply loving and being loved. Doing what I can to stay cancer-free is now my focus. Although I have finished chemotherapy, my path to healing and full recovery is long, and I must continue to take each day as it comes. I am, however, looking forward to being back at work and undertaking a few more public engagements in the coming months when I can. Despite all that's gone before, I enter this new phase of recovery with a renewed sense of hope and appreciation of life.
Videographer, according to his biog, and it was filmed Cameron Walker, who's joined us now, in August in Norfolk.
Yep.
It's a huge departure. What struck me about this film is this is a very different way of portraying the royal family, actually. What did you make of it when you saw it for the first time?
A huge difference between the video we got yesterday compared to the one she was effectively forced to do in March, announcing her cancer diagnosis. That video in March, shot by the BBC. This video shot, as you say, by Will Waugh. He's an independent, very trusted by the Prince and Princess of Wales videographer. He actually shot their behind-the-scenes video of the coronation back in May 2023. So it was an insight into their personal world. It was very artsy, wasn't it? Very cinematic, very, very emotional. And I think what we can take from that is it was the Princess of Wales taking control or attempting to take control of the narrative. And I think it was hugely powerful that she has decided to give us a window into her private world and the intimate relationships we see between her and William. Very intimate, kissing, hugging. You don't usually see that with members of the royal family. Her 3 children, of course, playing around, but also the kind of newsreel, old film footage, like parts of it. We saw cine film. And do you remember the last time we saw that? The late Queen's cine film footage back in the 1950s of her home videos of her and Prince Philip and Prince Charles and Princess Anne as well. So it's kind of harking back to the past there.
I mean, look, even my cynicism is abated by something that's shot as beautiful as that. The only thing I would say is I wonder whether this is a response to the way that the Sussexes portray themselves in that very Netflix-type way. And it is so different to how the Queen would ever have portrayed the royal family. And what was the Queen good at? The Queen was great at never complaining, never explaining and keeping that private dignity. Do you think we'll look back, Cameron, on this video and realise that this is the day that the royal family changed the way that they portray themselves forever?
I think certainly for the Prince and Princess of Wales generation, in a nutshell, potentially, I think, because the Prince and Princess of Wales clearly are doing things their way, not the royal family's protocol way. I can't imagine King Charles, for example, doing a similar video like this, talking about his cancer diagnosis. I think it's just the changing of the times. I think the Prince and Princess of Wales are very much aware of social media, and they're aware that they now have a platform that they can publish their own footage on their own social media channels in their own way without having to feed it first to the media to then broadcast to the public, because they have social media now. So I think we are seeing that change, but it all goes back, I think, to them wanting to do things their way and taking control of the narrative. And
I think, for me, one of the best things is to see the grandparents, the Middleton grandparents. I think they play a really significant role in that family's life, and they don't get the credit they deserve.
Yeah, and the dog order, and I think that's very much deliberate. The Princess would have wanted the Middletons to be in that video, showing that they have supported her through this last 9 months, as Prince William has.
Table.
Yeah, exactly. Relatable.
Right, Cameron, thank you so much. We will see you a little while later. So this morning as well, of course, around 2,000 criminals are set to be released from prison early in an attempt to tackle the overcrowding crisis in British jails. The offenders identified for the first group of early releases are all serving sentences of less than 5 years. A second group, up to 1,700 prisoners, all jailed for more than 5 years, are expected to be released next month. So let's go to Anna Riley, GBNews' Yorkshire and Humber reporter. Anna, you're at Hull Prison this morning, and you've already seen some prisoners leaving the building.
Good morning, Bev. Yes, we're here at HMP Hull, and we've seen a tranche so far of prisoners leaving already, carrying plastic bags, boxes, carrier bags, leaving as part of this early prison release scheme. Hull Prison, HMP Hull, is a Victorian prison. It was built in 1870. It's a Category B prison, which means it does hold prisoners on shorter term sentences, as well as prisoners who are waiting to be sentenced, prisoners who are on remand, and prisoners who are waiting to be moved to another category of prison. In the most recent inspection that was done at this prison, overcrowding was seen to be one of the major problems, with prisoners sharing a cell meant for one person, making that a double occupancy cell, just because there's not the space here, and that's a real problem in a lot of Category B prisons like this one. Another problem here is vermin as well, and rat infestations. Now, we spoke to prisoners earlier. One of them, he told us that he was been brought in because he'd broken taken a bail arrangement. He was meant to be released in November and he'd been released early. I did ask him, because it's a big problem, isn't it, Bev, that people understand that there's an overcrowding problem in prisons like this one, but victims also say, has justice been done when people are being released after serving 40% of their sentence rather than the 50%? And he said he did feel that justice had been done and that he'd learnt his lesson. But I spoke to another prisoner who'd also been released called Bill. He was in for assault. He was meant to serve 4 years and he came out after serving 1 year and 7 months, and he felt that there wasn't enough rehabilitation in this prison. He said he didn't feel equipped to enter life as it is now, and that was the scenario from both those prisoners that I spoke to. But we'll be here all morning, all afternoon, speaking to prisoners as they are released on this early prisoner release scheme.
Thank you, Anna. Anna Riley there. Right, up next, we're going to be going live to Brighton. We're going to see Andrew Pearce ahead of the Prime Minister's speech at the TUC conference, as the first Labour leader in 15 years takes to the stage there. And you've been getting in touch at home. Margaret says, seeing Princess Catherine in that video made my eyes sting a bit. Their children have grown up so fast, not toddlers anymore. Life appears to be going so fast. So will this ad break. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
A window cleaner is battling to prove he has the only portrait of William Shakespeare made in his lifetime.
Yes, so owner Stephen Wadlow has been trying to validate the painting for years. He's had it x-rayed, he's had it analysed by experts, he's had it scientifically dated back to 1595 when the playwright was 31 years old. If it is the Bard, it could be worth north of £200 million.
Steve, welcome to GB News. First of all, just explain how you came to have this painting in your possession.
It was sat there all my lifetime, sort of thing, while I was growing up, above the television in the corner. It was only back about 12 years ago that a visitor, she said, oh, I think it looks like William Shakespeare, or, you know, I like your copy of William Shakespeare, and was shocked to see it was an original painting. So it was only then that I started researching, and the different institutions have helped with the x-rays and all the rest of it. But then, is it actually Shakespeare? Well, all the facial comparisons, technology, everything like that, all matches with the Droschau, which is the only known 2D image of Shakespeare. And who do you go to find that out?
There's a suggestion in the Sun's write-up of this story that you've been struggling to be heard in the academic world, the lofty art world. It's all a bit snooty. Yes. It's about who you know, and you're a tradesman.
Yes, yes. That is definitely true in some avenues, but then I have to say, and it's lovely to be able to have this opportunity to say it, there's other people in that world that have been fabulous. It's taken a long time to sort of get listened to. We want the discussion out there because all the evidence that we've got indicates that this really should be discussed.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 9:50. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. So, Sir Keir Starmer will address union leaders at the Trade Union Congress in Brighton this morning. And the reason Andrew Pearce is not sat beside me this morning is because he's there, because he loves nothing more than hanging out with trade union leaders. Is that right, Andrew? We watched the speech yesterday of Paul Novak, the TUC
Absolutely.
chief. You and I were both a bit shocked by the tone of that speech. It was incredibly... He was very pleased at the demise of the Conservatives, understandably, but it was quite nasty in places, taking personal attacks on the likes of Nigel Farage and Jacob Rees-Mogg. Have you got any sense there in Brighton of how that speech was greeted yesterday morning?
It went down very well, actually, Bev, and I've heard a couple of other speeches here since I've been here, and there's been a lot more of that, naming names. Were you there for the Liz Truss moment? Were you there for the Jacob Rees-Mogg moment? And there were cheers and roars. They have waited so long for the Tories to lose an election, and they have taken almost, Bev, a sadistic pleasure in the defeat of some of those big names. Although, of course, why they would take the mick out of Nigel Farage, because I think he's a serious threat to Labour MPs, and that's, of course, why the trade union movement is so delighted today. They've got a Labour Prime Minister speaking to them for the first time as Prime Minister since 2009. I was there when Gordon Brown did the Labour conference, the TUC conference speech in 2009. It was in Liverpool, but we sort of knew that Labour were heading for defeat. Now we're at the beginning of this whole new beginning. And to talk about this whole new beginning is our very own political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, I thought the mood would be far more upbeat, but there is a bit of sense of there's anger, isn't there, here about the vote this afternoon on the winter fuel allowance. It's undeniable.
That's right, and given the amount of money the government has spent on many workers supported by unions, you thought it should be more victorious than it seems here at Brighton. That's right, the big vote today is at 2 o'clock, unless that's delayed by the Speaker of the House of Commons. That's the vote on this axing of this £200 or £300 winter fuel payment. That comes in next week on the 16th of September, so today is the last day they can really fit it in, the vote in the House of Commons. So it's quite a rush, though, for Sir Keir Starmer when he gets here.
Yeah, but it's not a good look either, because he wants this speech to be a big moment for the Labour movement, for his message to working people about how he's on their side and he's going to reform trade union laws, and yet it'll all be overshadowed by the scale of the rebellion this afternoon.
If it's that big, though, I mean,
it won't be 50.
We've been around for long enough, Andrew. We've seen
Yeah.
a lot of talk going into these meetings and these votes, and the rebellion is never that great. The Guardian saying 40 MPs, that could be some spin from Labour. 2 or 3 MPs might rebel, a dozen or so might withdraw support, abstain. That's kind of where we are. I was out in the House of Commons last night, outside that meeting of the Parliamentary Labour Party. Rachel Reeves spoke at it. She said, we have to lead and fight together, we unite together. And the mood in the room wasn't one of shouting or rebelling. I think 3 or 4 MPs asked hostile questions. All they're asking for was changes around the edges, maybe to lower the threshold to allow you to qualify for the pension credit, to get more poorer pensioners in. But as they know, the 800,000 people who haven't signed up for the pension credit, if they all signed up, it would wipe away the 1.3 billion they're saving from removing this benefit for all 10 million or so pensioners. So it's really a bit of, they're trying to show, this policy is about showing the OBR, showing the markets they can make tough choices on government spending.
Despite all that, Chris, he will get a great reception today, Keir Starmer.
He will say, though, looking at the briefed words overnight, that he will warn we can't keep paying out big pay rises, there'll be quite tough choices, and he will say clearly that the winter fuel allowance is one of those.
That's Chris Hope, I'm Andrew Pearce. We're here. We will be here for Keir Starmer's speech. I bet you can't wait for it. It's going to be the first speech by a Labour leader to Labour Prime Minister to a conference since 2009. To the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Blustery showers moving into northern areas this afternoon as a band of rain clears down to the south of the UK, and behind that band of rain is turning quite a lot colder as well into this afternoon. So a fairly cloudy and breezy start for many central and southern areas. A spell of wet weather will push through this afternoon and into this evening, and for many northern areas, Northern Ireland and much of Scotland will then see frequent blustery showers moving in. The winds will be particularly particularly strong up to the far northeast of Scotland, and it's going to feel pretty cold in that wind as well, feeling much closer to the mid-single figures, maximum temperatures in the low double digits. So that wet weather still to come through this evening across the south, but across the north, as I said, quite windy, particularly across northeastern areas of Scotland. But the Northern Isles have a rain warning in force into this evening. We could see 50 or 60 millimetres of rain falling over the course of the day. Showers pushing into parts of Northern Ireland, northwest England as well. We could see a mix of hail, possibly some thunder and lightning in those showers as well. But this wetter weather across the far south will linger for a time this evening, but it should clear through by tomorrow morning. And behind that band, it will turn much clearer, particularly across southern and eastern areas, where we're a little bit more sheltered from this brisk northwesterly wind. So the winds remain very strong overnight across the far north and east. Elsewhere, a breezy and fairly unsettled night across the north and west. The temperatures holding up. They're not falling quite as low as you might imagine, but still pretty chilly start out there on Wednesday morning. But plenty of sunshine across the south and east. And actually, it should be a fairly fine and bright day for many southern and eastern areas. But again, in the north and particularly across the far northwest, we'll continue to see some quite heavy showers through Wednesday. Then they continue to bring a risk of hail, thunder and lightning. And in the wind, again, temperatures feeling much closer to mid-single figures compared to these mid-double digits. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems to the west of Edinburgh along the M8. The motorway is partly blocked westbound just off the Edinburgh City bypass where a lorry is overturned, and there are long delays of at least 35 minutes heading north up the M1 through West Yorkshire between junction 41, 42 towards the M62. A lane's closed off at the scene of an earlier collision that's being recovered. In Staffordshire, the A50 at Stoke-on-Trent remains shut in the Stadium Junction and Heron Cross for an ongoing police investigation. East London, the Rotherhithe Tunnel remains closed for a technical issue causing long queues. And in West Sussex, the A280 remains shut in the A24 and the Finton roundabout along to Clapham. Investigation work still taking place following a serious crash yesterday morning. And disruption on Elizabeth Line trains GWR and Heathrow Express services west of Paddington following signalling problems at Ealing Broadway. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's an incredible demand. Good luck.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Tuesday the 10th of September. This is Britain's Newsroom live across the UK with Bev Turner and me, Andrew Pearce, at the Labour Party at the TUC conference in Brighton.
So, criminals freed early. Thousands of prisoners will be let out of prison early today. This is in a bid to tackle the overcrowding crisis in our jails. And the Prime Minister's facing a rebellion on this very controversial issue. Dozens of Labour MPs could refuse to back the government's planned cut to winter fuel allowance for pensioners. The policy is going to the vote this afternoon. And Trump versus Harris, the US presidential candidates will face off in their first debate tonight, 2 o'clock in the morning British time, ahead of the election in November. And the Lucy Letby inquiry begins. The public inquiry into how the crimes of the killer nurse were able to happen in the NHS will start today. And of course, a royal health update. Good news, the Princess of Wales has finished her chemotherapy treatment. She said that her focus is to stay cancer-free in a very cinematic little clip.
And we're just an hour away here at Brighton at the TUC conference from the Prime Minister speaking to the trade union leaders. It's the first time a Labour leader has addressed a party conference at the TUC conference as Prime Minister since 2009. All that coming up here.
Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbnews.com/your say. I mean, Andrew keeps falling over saying it's the Labour Party conference. It's an easy mistake to make because, let's be honest, the trade unionists are delighted. It must feel like a Labour Party conference down there. gbnews.com/your say. Chat to me because I'm here on my own today. First, though, the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. Bev's not on her own. She's got me here in the newsroom with her, so she doesn't have to worry too much. Well, the top story this morning, around 1,700 prisoners in England and in Wales are being released early today as the government attempts to tackle overcrowding in jails. The prison's watchdogs warning some released prisoners may reoffend or could end up homeless because of what's being described as inadequate preparation. But despite concerns from victims and charities, Downing Street is defending the move, saying it's vital to prevent unchecked criminality caused by lack of jail space. Well, our reporter Anna Riley has been speaking to one inmate who's been released this morning from HMP Hull.
Horrible, but the staff they're pretty good. Because and I don't like it in there, but the staff look after me. And I have bad mental health problems, so they didn't put me in a double cell. The rats were massive. The hygiene in there needs to be better.
MPs are set to vote later on a controversial government plan to remove winter fuel payments for most pensioners across the country. It's being defended, though, by Labour as a tough decision to address a claimed £22 billion deficit. And we'll see around 10 million people lose up to £300 in that energy support. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, argues the move is necessary to fix public finances after what she calls reckless Conservative spending. But Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride told us earlier he thinks Labour are picking the pockets of pensioners.
This is a choice. They took a choice when they first came in to give in to their trade union paymasters when it came to wage settlement, so 22% for the junior doctors, 14% for the train drivers and so on. And it is entirely wrong that they should be doing those kind of things on the backs of some of the most vulnerable pensioners up and down the country.
Mel Stride there, the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary. Well, the public inquiry into the crimes of convicted child killer nurse Lucy Letby begins today at Liverpool Town Hall. The investigation will scrutinise how she, now serving 15 life sentences, was able to murder and to harm babies at the Countess of Chester Hospital, despite repeated warnings to hospital bosses. This week, opening statements will be heard, with evidence expected to continue until December. And our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper is outside the inquiry for us.
Its primary aim, first and foremost, will be to try and get some answers for the victims' families, but it'll also take in factors like the response of Letby's colleagues, from the Countess of Chester Hospital, from the wider NHS. We know from the trial that there were whistleblowers from the very beginning. So, for example, it will ask why those concerns weren't investigated to begin with.
Sir Keir Starmer is set to address the Trades Union Congress today, warning workers that pay decisions he says will be shaped by tough choices needed to protect the economy. As the first Prime Minister to address the TUC in 15 years, Starmer's expected to highlight the importance of economic stability, even if it means pressure on pay for public sector workers. He'll also promise a new era of workers' rights and positive industrial relations. And we'll bring you that speech live here on GB News. Pensioners could see a boost of £460 to their state pension next April, with the full rate set to rise to more than £11,900 a year. That increase comes under the triple lock guarantee, with wage growth at 4% driving the change, according to the ONS. Well, welcome news for many. Experts are still warning that rise may fall short for those losing winter fuel payments, and it edges the state pension closer to the personal tax allowance. Meanwhile, this morning, wage growth has slowed and unemployment's dropped slightly to 4.1%, but job vacancies continue to fall. International news, and at least 40 people have been killed and 60 wounded in an Israeli airstrike on a camp for displaced Palestinians in Gaza. Reports at this stage suggest that tents were hit by multiple missiles early this morning, sparking fires and leaving deep craters. Israel has confirmed that strike, targeting what it described as a Hamas command centre. But Hamas have condemned the attack, calling it a brutal act of genocide and a violation of international law. And finally, James Earl Jones, the legendary voice of Darth Vader from Star Wars and Mufasa in The Lion King, has sadly died.
One day, Simba, the sun will set on my time here and will rise with you as the new king.
Well, the iconic actor who has sadly died at the age of 93 won multiple Emmys, Tonys, a Grammy and received an honorary Oscar. Born in 1931, he overcame a childhood stutter to become one of the most recognisable voices in entertainment. His career spanned Broadway, film and television, with standout roles in The Great White Hope and Field of Dreams. On Monday, his agent confirmed that news, marking an end to a remarkable life in show business. Those are the latest headlines. For now, I'll be back with you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning, welcome to Britain's Newsroom. I am in London, of course, at GB News headquarters. Andrew Pearce is at the TUC conference in Brighton. Andrew, before we talk about the political situation today, obviously if you were here, I'd want to hear your opinion on this film from Kate and William. So what do you make of it? What was your reaction to that very cinematic, Netflix-worthy video?
Well, absolutely. I thought just that. I mean, Harry and Meghan, eat your heart out. I mean, it was classic Netflix, wasn't it? It was beautifully done, beautifully filmed, unprecedented for the British royal family, for senior royals to be filmed like that. Nothing like it that I've ever seen or come across. We still, of course, don't know, Bev. We're thrilled, of course, that the chemotherapy is completed, but we don't know whether the cancer, that's it for her. But I was greatly encouraged. She looked a lot better, I thought. The relationship, though, between William and Kate and their children is extraordinary, isn't it? Warm, loving, like any ordinary family, and the sort of warmth and interaction you would never have seen with older royals and their children. And again, I thought, what a shame that Harry and Meghan never let us see their children, because I'm sure they have lovely times too. But look, it's an extraordinary moment in the history of the royal family, and I thought it was beautifully done. And some people won't like it. I think they'll think it was too saccharine, a bit too tabloidy, but I thought actually overall pretty good.
OK. We're going to be back to you just in a little while, Andrew, obviously to talk about what's happening there this morning. Huge pressure on this Labour government from the trade unions. But Cameron Walker is in the studio. We'll be back to you in just a moment because we want to hear what Cameron, of course, as our royal correspondent, made of this video. But just let's remind ourselves, here are Kate and William and the children.
You lead the way. As the summer comes to an end, I cannot tell you what a relief it is to have finally completed my chemotherapy treatment. Doing what I can to stay cancer-free is now my focus. Although I have finished chemotherapy, my path to healing and full recovery is long, and I must continue to take each day as it comes.
OK, Cameron Walker is here with me in the studio. We just showed you a little clip of it, then we showed the full version at the top of the show. I think Andrew makes a really important point there, Cameron, that this is good news. It's wonderful. She looks well. But they haven't confirmed that she's cancer-free, have they?
No, and I think there's been a lot of confusion, actually, over the last 16 hours or so. What we do know, what has been confirmed by the Princess of Wales, is she has completed her course of preventative chemotherapy and she is focused on staying cancer-free. There is no suggestion from Kensington Palace, however, that she is in remission or is currently cancer-free. And I think what we can read into her planned engagements over the next few months is that, as they say, it's going to be a small handful of engagements. But because it's only going to be a small handful of engagements, I'm getting the impression that she's got good days and bad days with her health. And from my understanding, what would usually happen with royal engagements is we get kind of a lot of notice of engagements. And I suspect that maybe when it comes to the planning, for example, of the carol concert at Westminster Abbey or the Princess attending the Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph as two examples, I suspect we're not going to find out or have confirmation of her attending until very close to the time indeed, because of course you have to remember, if they announce something a week in advance and she had a bad day the day before she was meant to go on this public engagement and she has to pull out last minute, you can just imagine the media speculation and the public panic that would happen. So I can see why that perhaps would happen.
It's interesting, isn't it, that it was the Middletons in this video. It was Granny and Grandpa playing cards around the table with the kids. And I noticed that James Middleton, her brother, we just seen a picture there. He posted this image, and this was when she was diagnosed with cancer. This was a few months ago now, and he'd said on there, over the years, we've climbed many mountains together. I don't think we've got that image right now. There it is. And as a family, we will climb this one too. And obviously, and James here looks rather like George as well, doesn't he? He does. You can see the family resemblance in that. And then he was one of the first people, if not the first person on Instagram, to respond to the video yesterday as her brother, and he said, I couldn't be more proud of you. We're getting real insight into how that side of this famous family works.
Yeah, and I think the Middleton family are incredibly close, and I think it was deliberate that we saw Mike and Carol Middleton in that video, not in Adelaide Cottage, sorry, in their Norfolk Anmer Hall, surrounded by Prince William and the three children as well, being very much part of that family. And we saw the paparazzi shot, didn't we, of the Princess of Wales and her mother, Carol, in the car before the cancer diagnosis was made public, and I think it shows they really have also been the Princess's rock alongside Prince William, supporting her in her cancer journey. But of course, her recovery from that major abdominal surgery in January, I think it's quite easy to forget sometimes because of this cancer diagnosis. She did undergo extremely, major surgery back in January. Yeah.
We were just looking at pictures here, of course, in sort of earlier times when everything was that bit calmer. The question, of course, that remains after all of this is how well will she continue to be? What we do know, though, is that the public response, Cameron, to this clip yesterday, this video, has been completely different to the public response to when they had that image which was photoshopped by her own admission. They tweaked around. Getting 3 kids to sit still is not easy. This has been a triumph from a PR point of view.
Oh, absolutely. And I remember sat at this desk when the first video came out of her announcing cancer diagnosis, GBNews viewers writing into us saying they were in floods of tears of how sad they were at the news of the Princess of Wales having cancer. The GBNews viewers writing in yesterday when the video was released saying she's completed chemo, floods of tears again, but this time tears of happiness. The Princess of Wales clearly has tugged the heartstrings of the nation. There is overwhelming support for her, and particularly her way of announcing it as well in a very glossy video too.
We've not had any response, of course. We probably wouldn't get one from Meghan and Harry in a way.
No.
Do you think there's some competition, though, between the two couples? Because if there is, then Kate and William have just slam-dunked it into the bottom of the back of the net. If the competition is who can portray ourselves in the most social media-friendly way that wins over the public, they've just won that fight easily.
I mean, we've had the response from the King and Queen saying they're so happy that the Princess of Wales is clearly recovering from her cancer with the chemotherapy. When it comes to Harry and Meghan, I think it was unfortunate timing that their new Netflix documentary was announced just hours after the Princess's video came out. To be fair to Harry and Meghan,
that's coincidental.
I think it's coincidental. To be fair to Harry and Meghan, they would have had no say whatsoever as to when Netflix decided to announce this new Polo documentary, whether it was Netflix's decision to deliberately publish it then or it was just coincidence. Only they can answer that. But in terms of who's winning on either side of the Atlantic, I could just point you to the opinion polls. The latest YouGov opinion poll showed the Prince and Princess of Wales most popular royals by far in the United Kingdom. Harry and Meghan, the very bottom, apart from Prince Andrew.
Harry and Meghan have done a documentary about polo.
Prince Harry has, yeah.
About horsey polo, not water polo or mints,
No.
just to be clear.
Yeah, horsey polo. Prince Harry played it for decades. It's been in the works for a while. Netflix have officially announced it literally a couple of hours after this video was released.
Does it look good?
I've only seen 4 stills of it, so it's 4 stills of a polo field and some horses, so we'll wait and see. Watch this space. Yeah.
Right, Cameron, thank you. It's nice to have a little bit of royal good news anyway, isn't it, this morning? Right, OK. Around 2,000 criminals are set to be released from prison early today under Sir Keir Starmer. This is in an attempt to tackle overcrowding crisis in Britain's jails. So the offenders identified for the first group of early releases are all serving sentences of less than 5 years. The second group of up to 1,700 prisoners, all jailed for more than 5 years, are expected to be released next month. Well, Charlie Peters is at Wandsworth Prison. Good morning, Charlie. We saw Anna Riley earlier, and she'd spoken to some inmates who were released this morning. What have you seen there at Wandsworth?
Well, the third prisoner on early release has just left here at HMP Wandsworth. It's a Category B prison. By any metric, this is one of the worst prisons in the country. Its cells are cramped, they're dirty, and they are crumbling. This prison was built in 1851. It's a Victorian prison. Those cells were meant for single occupancy, but many people here are sharing those cells. And as people are coming out, there's actually quite a few people waiting outside to greet them. There's something here of a party atmosphere. Here's some footage that I shot earlier. Now, none of the prisoners who've come out want to be spoken to by the media yet. One quickly said that it was 20 minutes from the wing to getting out of the prison here. The second person to come out of HMP Wandsworth this morning confirmed he was an early release prisoner, walked over to some of those in the crowds I've just shown you and lit up a joint with them. Now, I've seen a couple of people I'm convinced are police just further down the road waiting in a car, watching on as people are coming out of prison today. And it comes as there's widespread concern in the policing community, but also among victims of crime about who might be coming out. The probation services are on edge. This is a very tense day for criminal justice in Britain.
Extraordinary pictures. Thank you, Charlie. Charlie Peters there at Wandsworth Prison. This could be another PR disaster for Sir Keir Starmer, to see prisoners just being let out like that with the celebratory atmosphere, as Charlie just said. Anyway, right, we're going to be going through the top stories with our panel in just a moment. Would you be offended if you were called middle-aged? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
And feelings of stress and anxiety tend to be quite normal for a lot of kids. And if it's normal for the kids, then it affects the parents as well.
Well, it seems that our canine friends could be the cure after new research by the University of Bristol found that dogs are incredibly sensitive to their owners' emotions.
OK, how do we cheat into this? How can your doggy help your family handle stress during this time of the year? Let's go to the Director of Canine Affairs at Guide Dogs UK, Tim Stafford. Tim, we're talking about this as if it's a big revelation, but obviously, you know, a man like yourself, you're well used to this, and you can see when a dog is reacting. What form would that reaction take, do you think?
Yeah, you know what? It's nice when the science kind of confirms what most of us have known for a very long time. Our dogs become members of our family and they come very, very close to us. So it's no surprise that anything that goes on in the family is going to be detected and picked up by the dog. That can be changes in behaviours. It can certainly be the dogs watching our behaviours and starting to mirror those behaviours. But what this research says is that the dogs can actually smell our emotions. It's not just that they're responding to our behaviour changes, they're responding to our physiological changes as well, because we smell differently when we start to get anxious. So at this time, there's lots of changes in a lot of families' lives. Kids are going back to school, young people are going to university, parents are having to deal with all of the emotions attached to that. So it's no surprise that our dogs start to detect that too.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Very good morning, 10:21. This is Britain's Newsroom with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce down in Brighton at the TUC conference, where Sir Keir Starmer will be talking in about 40 minutes or so. But in the studio with me now, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and political commentator Piers Pottinger. Morning, gentlemen. Right, let's talk about this. PM is apparently at the moment, Nigel, defiant on the fact that he's going to keep the winter fuel cuts for pensioners. Do you think he had any idea how badly this was going to go?
I do wonder, because I mean it's the same sort of thing when the Lib Dems went back on their promise to get rid of tuition fees. They didn't recover. I mean, in 2015 they were almost wiped out, and if you talk to young people, they felt really betrayed by that. The danger of this is the same thing will happen. I mean, what I think should happen is that Rachel Reeves should keep it, but put it into the roll it into the pension, which means it can be taxed. So she'll still get money back, but wealthier pensioners will pay, because wealthier pensioners will pay tax on it.
But that seems so obvious. So there must have been a political... She's not stupid. She must have known that. So there must have been a political reason why they implemented this policy in the first place.
Right. Well, the problem with the way I was suggesting is you don't get that money instantly. So what she needs to explain is she needed 1.4 billion before the end of the year. Very few ways of getting that in one big lump. Easiest thing is to cancel the winter fuel allowance, so she'll get that money this year and, of course, successive years.
Is it that, Piers? Or is it that it just disregards traditional Conservative voters about whom they're not that bothered?
Well, first of all, once you give someone something like that kind of allowance, it's very hard to take it back. Of course, it's absolutely insane they're doing this because they've made a mistake. They know they've made a mistake, but they can't be seen to doing a U-turn and giving in to the public view. It's a sign of weakness. And Starmer's interview the other day on television, where he was reveling in saying we're making unpopular decisions with a big smile, he says as if he's really enjoying it. And that's the worrying thing about the authoritarian side of this man coming through. No, this is not necessary. I think the vote is going to be, I mean, it's irrelevant because they've got such a big majority, they're going to win, but there will be some rebels. I find myself for the first time ever agreeing with Diane Abbott, who's against this, and at least has the courage to vote against it. What I think Nigel and I would agree, MPs who abstain on this are cowards and letting down their constituents. If I have an MP I've voted for, I expect them to vote on the big issues in the House. That's what they're there to do. By abstaining, or even worse, some of them keeping away today so they don't have to vote, it's just another form of abstention. But they're cowards, and I think there'll be 30 or 40 of them, but Starmer will still have a victory. And this very unfortunate attack on pensioners, it's only the first, mind you, because there's already trade unions and the left-wing think tanks like the Resolution Foundation are suggesting that Rachel Reeves goes further on pensions and is talking about instigating national insurance being paid on pension contributions, which is an absolutely absurd idea.
Yeah, well, what would be sensible is to have national insurance paid for those who are working. I mean, the trouble with our whole system of giving money to older people is it's based on the past. It's based on an age when people didn't live as long as they do now. We're looking at sort of a life expectancy 20 years more than, say, it was in the 1950s. So on that particular point, at the moment, after 60, you don't pay national insurance. Yet 1 in 3 over 66 men are working, and 1 in 4 over 66 women, at least doing some paid work. As far as I can see, why shouldn't they pay national insurance?
Yeah.
And the same thing applies. We have a system whereby we get free prescriptions at 60, and a lot of concessionary travel or even free travel. And you begin to think, at 60...
And 60 is still young. 60 is 50.
60 is young, but you're earning the same amount of money as you did at 59. So why aren't those things coming in at retirement age at 66, which would save a great deal of money?
But I think exactly, Nigel, you see what Rachel Reeves is doing here, like the Bridget Phillipson did with the absurd VAT on public schools, is tinkering at the edges. They ought to be looking at the bigger picture and being brave enough, they've got a big enough majority, to do serious things. The demographic is changing, has changed. One looks at the retirement age, it's probably far too low. It should be maybe 70, and it will be soon.
It's going up to 68 very shortly.
It is, but I mean, I think it'll go up to 70. It'll have to go up to 70 because we're still behind catching up. And in other European countries, of course, it's much worse. In France, when they tried and put up the retirement age, everyone hit the streets and there was almost a revolution. But the French like doing that. I have a history of it. But no, I mean, Rachel Reeves is just tinkering around all this, and of course, blaming everything on the Conservatives. I think we're all fed up with that now. Let's look at the future, and and also, for goodness sake, where is the growth they talked about in the election campaign? Well, where's that going to come from? Nothing this Chancellor is doing is in any way encouraging British business, encouraging people to go back to work, which is what so many of them should be doing.
10 million people in these figures today of working age who aren't earning anything as well. That's still an issue, isn't it? And a record number of wealthy and super wealthy who are moving. You must know people, Piers. Sure. You hang out with the super wealthy. How many do you know who are
Well, I know 3 people who have gone.
Really? And would you consider them to be?
One of them's one of the heads of one of the biggest investment firms in this country, and he has taken him. I mean, he's sold his house and he's moved a lot of his money out of this country.
Where has he gone, if you don't mind me asking?
Believe it or not, France.
Really?
Partly because he can afford it.
Because people are moving to Italy as well, I hear. A lot of the tax breaks there.
I don't think an awful lot of people are moving. I mean, I'm sure there are the occasional
Well, there don't need to be too many, because these are the very wealthy. And again, what socialists don't understand is if you have no wealth at the top, it is actually a bad thing. Yeah. Because socialists are against wealth of any kind. They trade on poverty. They need more poor people so they can count on their votes.
Over the last 30 years, to a point. I mean, at the moment, the bottom 50% of income earners own 5% of the country's wealth. The top 1% own nearly a quarter of it. Now, that can't be right.
That's precisely why you're saying we need that 1%.
But if we lose it, it's...
You lose a huge amount.
But the real point is...
disagree on basically what Tory policy is, that the idea is both a socialist or a conservative Conservative would believe in wealth creation. The difference is that the Conservatives believe in looking after the wealth creators, and what they do is...
hoping it trickles down.
And hoping it trickles down in the form of jobs. But what they do is keep the money for themselves, and that's the bit I object to.
No, but what the socialists do is take all the money we've saved. and that's what they're doing now.
Off you afterwards.
I think there's genuine fear amongst those who have worked hard and put themselves under pressure and their families under pressure and mortgaged and remortgaged and built businesses. Those are the people that are fleeing the country, Nigel.
And if
much as you've tempted to get, to get the smallest violin out for these people, it does mean that we will have a different sort of landscape of financial capacity, because all of those very rich will also spend their money in this country.
Yeah, I mean, some of them, I understand some of them will leave, just as some people on the tax on private schools will take their children out, but not many. So the estimate is there's 26,000 non-dom. Well, there's 26,000 non-doms in the country, for instance. Under the new rules, they'll be paying more tax. The prediction is 100 will leave. So although you may well know,
well, we haven't had the budget yet. And I'm sure it'll be punitive, because that's what this government is already showing that it is. It's punitive. It's taking stuff away from everyone, creating more poverty. There is no sign of them encouraging any kind of growth
at the moment. And no doubt these conversations are being had in Brighton, where Andrew Pearce is at the TUC get-together this morning at the conference. We're going to be going to that in a little while, and you two will be back also in the next hour. First, though, the news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 10:30. The top stories from the newsroom this morning. Around 1,700 prisoners in England and in Wales are being released early today as the government attempts to tackle overcrowding. The prison's watchdogs warning some released prisoners may reoffend or end up homeless because of inadequate preparation. But despite concerns from victims and charities, Downing Street is defending the move, saying it's vital to prevent unchecked criminality caused by lack of jail space. Sex offenders, terrorists and those convicted of serious violent crime are excluded from the scheme. Sir Keir Starmer's standing firm on what he's described as a tough decision to scale back winter fuel payments as Labour braces for potential backlash from backbench MPs. 17 Labour MPs have so far signed a motion opposing those cuts, with unions also strongly criticising the move. But the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are still urging MPs to support the plan, claiming it's essential to secure the foundations of the economy. The public inquiry into the crimes of convicted child serial killer Nurse Lucy Letby has begun today at Liverpool Town Hall. The investigation is scrutinising how Letby, now serving 15 life sentences, was able to murder and to harm babies at the Countess of Chester Hospital, despite repeated warnings to hospital bosses. This week's opening statements will be heard, with evidence expected to continue until December. Sir Keir Starmer is set to address the Trades Union Congress, warning workers that pay decisions will, he says, be shaped by tough choices needed to protect the economy. As the first Prime Minister to address the TUC in 15 years, Starmer's expected to highlight the importance of economic stability, even if it means pressure on pay for public sector workers. He'll also promise a new era of workers' rights and positive industrial relations. Pensioners could see a boost of £460 to their state pension next April, with the full rate set to rise to more than £11,900 a year. The increase comes under the triple lock guarantee, with wage growth now at 4% driving that change, according to the ONS. Meanwhile, wage growth has slowed and unemployment's dropped slightly to 4.1%, but job vacancies are continuing to fall. And at least 40 people have been killed and 60 injured in an Israeli airstrike on a camp for displaced Palestinians in southern Gaza. Reports suggest that tents were hit by multiple missiles early this morning, sparking fires and leaving deep craters. Israel has confirmed the strike, targeting what it described as a Hamas command centre. Emergency crews are now working to recover casualties from the scene. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis, back with you in half an hour. Next, though, a look at the markets.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, let's take a quick look at the markets as they stand this morning. The pound will buy you $1.3081. The euro, 1.1854 euros. The price of gold is £1,912.01 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is standing at 8,217 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come this morning, I'm going to be talking about the first debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. That happens tonight. We're looking forward to that. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Blustery showers moving into northern areas this afternoon as a band of rain clears down to the south of the UK, and behind that band of rain is turning quite a lot colder as well into this afternoon. So a fairly cloudy and breezy start for many central and southern areas. A spell of wet weather will push through this afternoon and into this evening, and for many northern areas, Northern Ireland and much of Scotland will then see frequent blustery showers moving in. The winds will be particularly strong up to the far northeast of Scotland, and it's going to feel pretty cold in that wind as well, feeling much closer to the mid-single figures, maximum temperatures in the low double digits. So that wet weather still to come through this evening across the south, but across the north, as I said, quite windy, particularly across northeastern areas of Scotland. But the Northern Isles have a rain warning in force into this evening. We could see 50 or 60 millimetres of rain falling over the course of the day. Showers pushing into parts of Northern Ireland, northwest England as well. We could see a mix of hail, possibly some thunder and lightning in those showers as well. But this wetter weather across the far south will linger for a time this evening, but it should clear through by tomorrow morning. And behind that band, it will turn much clearer, particularly across southern and eastern areas, where we're a little bit more sheltered from this brisk northwesterly wind. So the winds remain very strong overnight across the far north and east. Elsewhere, a breezy and fairly unsettled night across the north and west. The temperatures holding up. They're not falling quite as low as you might imagine, but still pretty chilly start out there on Wednesday morning. But plenty of sunshine across the south and east. And actually, it should be a fairly fine and bright day for many southern and eastern areas. But again, in the north and particularly across the far northwest, we'll continue to see some quite heavy showers through Wednesday. Then they continue to bring a risk of hail, thunder and lightning. And in the wind, again, temperatures feeling much closer to mid-single figures compared to these mid-double digits. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems continue to the west of Edinburgh. The M8 is down to a single lane westbound. A lorry's overturned just off the Edinburgh City bypass. And it's really slow up the M1 heading north through West Yorkshire, junction 40 to 41 heading north of Wakefield, where a car's broken down in the inside lane, not being helped by an earlier collision. There's long gone further up towards the M62. And in Staffordshire, the A50 remains closed through Stoke-on-Trent to the Stadium Junction for a police investigation. In East London, the Rotherhithe Tunnel remains closed for an ongoing technical issue. In West Sussex, the A280 remains shut in the A24 at the Finton roundabout through to Clapham. Investigation works underway following an accident, and trains are suspended eastbound in Westbury and Newbury due to an operational incident, Great Western Railway tell us. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Very good morning, 10:39. This is Britain's Newsroom with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew is in Brighton this morning at the TUC conference. Now, the race for the White House moves up a gear as Kamala Harris and Donald Trump go face-to-face in their first presidential debate this evening. It's going to take place at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. It's a venue which was established by President Ronald Reagan. It's a key swing state. So with just 2 months to go before America goes to the polls, both candidates will be looking to gain the advantage necessary to win the election. So let's talk to Chairman of Republicans Overseas, friend of the channel, Greg Swenson. Greg, good to see you. I was casting my mind back. It was the debate that Trump and Biden had was it in June?
June 27th.
Which signalled the end, really, of Biden being president. We forget he's still president. It's easy to forget that he's still in control of the country. It's amazing, isn't it? So how will this be different to that?
I don't think it will be as monumental as that one, because, you know, you had a sitting president who basically lost the nomination because of it. And the press and the Democrat Party, including Kamala Harris, were covering up for Biden for 6 months, you could even argue 3.5 years since he became president.
Yeah.
But they really couldn't do it anymore after that. So that was a massive change. You know, they just couldn't cover up anymore. So this one, I don't think will have a dramatic outcome like that one did, but it has the potential to. You've had a compliant press, not even compliant, basically an activist press in the U.S., essentially campaigning for Vice President Harris. And then you've got, you know, the Trump derangement syndrome also in the media. So it hasn't really been fair the last 8 weeks. I'm not complaining, but it's amazing that Trump is still tied after 8-10 weeks of massive excitement about Kamala Harris. So this could be the moment where Trump actually, it's on him to define her record and her policies, because the press won't. She's done no interviews, no press conferences.
The problem with Donald Trump, the problem with this matchup of these two, to use a sporting phrase, is that she brings out the worst in him, and he loses his discipline when faced with Kamala Harris, and he just goes very personal, and it's not very nice.
It's not a good look.
Greg.
And Bev, you're absolutely right. They both have great risks here. I'm more concerned with the downside risk than the upside potential.
Yes.
If President Trump goes off the wall and loses his cool, it's devastating. If Kamala Harris goes full word salad, it's devastating for her. It could be a terribly painful debate to watch if you see any of that. I hope it's not. I mean, they're hard to watch anyway.
Yeah.
But if you see, you know, President Trump attacking Vice President Harris with any sort of vigor, I think that's a bad look. He needs to stick to the policies. If you look at what are the most important things to Americans, it's the inflation and economy, 1, and the border crisis, 2. And the number 3, 4, 5 are way down there. And on both of those issues, he polls between 10 and 20 higher than Vice President Harris. Granted, he was polling 30 points higher than Biden on those things. So, you know, Biden, as it turns out, was a much worse candidate. But if he sticks to the issues, he wins.
Absolutely. Right, Greg, thank you. Sorry,
Thanks,
short
Bev.
but sweet. No doubt we'll have your reflections on it. Hopefully it won't be as painful as we think it might be. Right, GB News has a special US election debate show in the early hours of tomorrow morning at 2 o'clock. Don't miss that. Now, the public inquiry into convicted child serial killer nurse Lucy Letby begins today. The investigation is going to look into how Letby was able to murder and harm babies at the Countess of Chester Hospital.
We're outside Liverpool Town Hall this morning because today is scheduled to be the first day of the Thirlwall inquiry. Now, what that is an independent statutory inquiry that was announced by the government's health department last September following the trial of Lucy Letby, in which she was convicted of 7 counts of murder and 7 counts of attempted murder. Now, it's going to be led by Lady Justice Thirlwall, hence the name, and its primary aim, first and foremost, will be to try and get some answers for the victims' families, but it'll also take in factors like the response of Letby's colleagues from the Countess of Chester Hospital, from the wider NHS. We know from the trial that there were whistleblowers from the very beginning. So, for example, it will ask why those concerns weren't investigated to begin with. We know that it's scheduled thus far to go on until at least December, and over the coming weeks we'll be hearing evidence from family representatives and from other various witnesses, all of whom will give their accounts so that this inquiry can attempt ultimately to try and learn lessons from the horrific sequence of events that took place at the Countess of Chester Hospital between June of 2015 and June of 2016.
That was our North West of England reporter, Sophie Reaper, there. Now, moving on, we're going to head back to Brighton in just a moment. A Sir Keir Starmer's speech at the TUC conference. I'm sure you can't wait. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News.
We're
proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
When I knew that I was doing this segment this week, I feel like this week was a real homework task for me because I'll be honest, I haven't been around Scottish food much in my life, but I obviously know all the obvious. And I thought I'd bring in a selection of some of, I guess, the sort of the quintessential culinary delights of the North. I mean, we have in front of us haggis.
I think we should begin with some haggis.
So, Michael, I've never eaten haggis before. This is going to be the first time.
Well, have you eaten anything like haggis before? Have you eaten anything that is made from the intestines of an animal?
I mean, I've had things like chopped liver and, you know, a bit of offal here and there.
Well, there we are. I mean, I got a great surprise. I was holding a great... When I was in government, I was holding a great party in Scotland, and I had a lot of Spanish visitors, and I was offering them haggis, and I thought that they would be astonished by haggis and maybe repelled. But when they ate it, they said, oh, no, this is morcilla. So, you know, there is an equivalent in Spain.
Absolutely.
So if I recall, and you've probably been mugging it up, which I have not, but haggis is made within the stomach of a sheep.
Yes.
And you take the heart and the lungs and some other part of the sheep and you mash it up.
With onions, oatmeal, suet.
Yes.
And it's stuffed into the sheep's stomach. But a lot of the haggis you get these days, especially sort of the slightly cheaper varieties in supermarkets, it's usually an artificial casing.
Oh.
You know what? This is actually quite nice.
I think it's absolutely heavenly. And
it's very savoury.
To me, it's two things. Yes, to me, it's two things. It's both the taste and the texture. You quite rightly refer to the oatmeal going in there. So it's got this crunchy, granular sort of texture. Marvellous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
10:47, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Thank you for joining me this morning. So the Prime Minister will address union leaders shortly at the Trade Union Congress in Brighton. Our very own Andrew Pearce is live at the scene with Christopher Hope and also Kevin Maguire. Andrew.
Good morning. Here we are, the ugly bug ball here. Now, Chris, set up what's happened. So the big speech, the Prime Minister speaking very shortly. Huge anticipation. The first Labour Prime Minister to address a TUC conference since Gordon Brown in Liverpool in 2009.
The first difficult day, I think, of the Prime Minister's 2 months in charge. He speaks to the members of the TUC delegates here at 11 a.m. We do know two major unions, Unite, a big funder of the Labour Party, wants him to not to go ahead with this axing of the winter fuel payment, £300 off for millions of pensioners. But they made very clear to the PLP, the Parliamentary Labour Party, last night. I was outside the room where Rachel Reeves addressed it. There's no going back. They're going to go ahead with it. Then he's back to Parliament for a vote around 3 or 3:30, when maybe a few dozen MPs might not support it. 3 or 4 might rebel, but that's about it. But it's the first, interestingly, is a kind of setback, I think, for this Labour government. They've kind of got it wrong, I think most people agree, to save 1.3 billion by doing this.
Well, and somebody unusually who thinks Labour's got something wrong is Kevin Maguire, my old mucker.
I always call it as I see it.
You do, to be fair. Now, you've been coming to Labour conferences for years. TUC, I keep saying Labour conferences because it's pretty hard to divide the two. I bumped into Angela Rayner. There's lots of Labour MPs here, Labour ministers here. But you've been coming to TUC conferences for years and years. I thought the mood here, Kevin, would be buoyant. more upbeat. It's a bit low-key. Why?
Yeah, I think Margaret Thatcher was still Prime Minister when I first came to...
Those were the glory days, Kevin. Those were the glory
very
days.
bad days, as you know. I think it's because it's more workmanlike now.
Right.
And I think they're just kind of got their heads screwed on, and there's a lot they agree with the Labour government will do on improving public services, employment rights, renationalising rail, honouring the independent peer review bodies for teachers and others. But then they will fall out on areas like the winter fuel allowance, which most trade union leaders think is a bad cut. But in a way, I think Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, will get an easier ride here today, unless there are protesters going to jump up and shout about Gaza in the public gallery, than he will in Parliament, because of course he's going to have so many of his MPs. It'll be dozens of his MPs abstaining. They won't vote with him, and it's very hard to find anybody in the Labour Party in Parliament, including ministers, who think cutting winter fuel allowance as a standalone cut is a good idea. They realise it's a mistake, but they haven't gone back on it.
The other thing I keep hearing here as well is, if you think the row over winter fuel is bad, there's going to be an even bigger one when the Labour government refuses to remove the cap on child benefit. Currently capped at two child.
The Osborne cut, famously.
Absolutely, but real anger about
and
that.
That's why I think, is there a trust issue, Kevin? Do the delegates here trust Keir Starmer to do right by them? Angela Rayner is their person, no question, but do they trust Keir Starmer?
Like trade union leaders are professional negotiators. They realise Keir Starmer is not going to do everything they want. He's not going to do everything they want, and so there'll be a lot of to and fro. But they're in the same family broadly. Most trade unions aren't affiliated to the Labour Party, but they're in the Labour movement. He isn't hostile to trade unions in a way Tony Blair was. He is going to honour, I think, unemployment rights, which will be a big boost for people in the workplace. But you're right, there'll be lots of other rows down the line. I mean, that's politics. That's grown up. Starmer will have them too with business groups. He'll have them too with environmentalists. He'll have them with a lot of cultural warriors. That's you're in number 10. What you have to do is not score own goals, and the winter fuel allowance cut is an own goal.
He's going to say in this speech, Andrew, in about quarter of an hour, pay will be directly shaped by the crisis we've inherited. So having given all that money out in the summer, he's going to warn that next year won't be so easy for the pay.
And this is a narrative, isn't it, Kevin? It's all the Tories' fault. We've got to fix everything because the Tories broke everything.
It is.
But how long can they keep saying that?
Yeah, well, what's your answer to it? Yeah, you get a dire inheritance to say. They've got that 22 billion figure they put on the black hole. Some of that is from the peer review body awards, but they're independent. Are you really going to break the independence of them straight away and not honour them? No, you're not. You can probably do it for a year. You can probably do it for 2 years. He always used to say he didn't have a magic wand to fix everything. Well, in some ways he's going to have to be a magician, but he's got to solve this problem of winter fuel allowance, because I think it's separate to the two-child benefit cut, because the two-child benefit cut would require fresh public spending, about $2.5 billion. Winter fuel was existing spending. He is cut. He's taken away.
He's not going to go back. It comes in on the 16th of September. The reason why it is today, it comes in on the 16th of September, this cut. So today's the last chance of any chance to change it.
It's very bad stage management by the Labour government. They've got a speech which he hopes will get good publicity, but it's going to be completely drowned out by a vote a few hours later. In the olden days, that would never have happened in the Labour government.
No. But I suspect they've thought, right, let's do it all on one day, because a lot of newspapers and a lot of TV channels might just actually turn against his speech.
But it's not required.
They might also be competing with a certain Princess of Wales, because that's getting a lot of publicity.
She may win.
The measure they're doing doesn't need a vote in the Commons. They're doing it because they feel they have to on government time. So it's not required. It's for one of these SIs. He could go through without a vote.
When he walks in, will there be a standing ovation for Starmer?
I doubt a full standing ovation. He'll get a lot of applause. There'll be no doubt about that.
So who will be the ones that will sit firmly down and will not get up?
Well, Sharon Graham and Unite seem to be his most vocal
and that's
critics.
the most powerful union in the world.
Well, when Len McCluskey, her predecessor, was General Secretary, they backed Jeremy Corbyn in Labour, and they didn't endorse the Labour manifesto.
That's right.
So it's whenever you hear, Labour's paymasters are trade unions, it's far more complex than that.
So she'll be sat down when the standing ovation.
I doubt she'll stand up and give him a standing
Well, we'll be looking out
ovation.
for her. We'll be looking out for Sharon.
Unless
Because
somebody,
she's the most powerful female trade union leader in the country.
Unless somebody can put an electric charge in that chair,
Well, maybe
so she has
GBNews
to
can arrange
jump up.
it. We can do many things. We've got many resources.
I think it would be assault, actually, to do
Right.
that.
That is Kevin McGuire, my grumpy friend from the Tony. That is Chris Hope, our political editor of GBNews. I'm Andrew Pearce here. We've got Keir Starmer, which we'll be bringing you live. I bet you can't wait. But first, we're going to go to the grumpy weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. An area of cloud and rain moves south today. Behind that, blustery showers follow on and much colder Arctic winds for the next few days. Low pressure is pushing through northern Scotland into the North Sea. This weather front is clearing its way southwards, and that contains a fair amount of cloud across central and southern parts of England, mid and south Wales. Outbreaks of rain on that front, although the rain is tending to fizzle out as the afternoon progresses. 1 or 2 showers to the south of it, a lot of cloud, brighter skies across northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, but a cold wind starts to arrive, and that wind will be particularly strong for the northeast of Scotland. 50-60 mile-per-hour wind gusts could cause disruption, and the rain for Shetland turning heavier and more persistent through the day could also lead to a few issues. Now, by the evening, the rain is across South Wales, southwest England, into the home counties, but it is clearing through. North Wales, North Midlands, Northern England, plenty of sunshine actually before the sun goes down. Northern Ireland, Scotland, prone to a lot of showers, and that strong wind continuing to strengthen as the afternoon and evening arrive. Now, the rain persists for Shetland into the evening, but eventually turns more showery overnight. 60 to 80 millimetres possible, and there'll be persistent showers rolling into the northwest of Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England and parts of North Wales overnight. Clear skies elsewhere and a colder night for sleeping, certainly compared with recent nights, most places in the single figures. Now we start Wednesday with plenty of bright skies in the south and the east, but further showers arriving into the north and northwest. And that's the way it continues through the day. Most of the day will be dry towards the southwest, but elsewhere there'll be a lot of showers coming through, a brisk and gusty wind, and it's going to feel cold in that wind.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us! Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the...
Welcome to Britain's Newsroom. As we speak, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is on stage at Brighton. Here he is.
MPs across Sussex from Worthing to Hastings. And Congress, Brighton holds a special place in my heart because 3 years ago, I gave my first in-person conference speech as Labour leader here in this very hall. I said that our party had to change if we were to win a general election. And Congress, we did. And thank you all for the part that you played in that. And now, because of the hard work that we did together, I'm able to address this Congress for the first time as Prime Minister. The first time, I think I'm right in saying, that a Prime Minister has come here for 15 years, since 2009. 2009, and Paul, that's a year you will remember well. It's the last time Everton got through to a cup final. Although I actually think you lost 2-0 to one of the lesser London teams. So the one promise I can make today is that prime ministerial visits were a bit more frequent, perhaps, than Everton Cup finals. Because in all seriousness, I sat on the opposition benches and took many a lecture from the Tories, telling the world what working people do or don't want. And you know that every single one of them was delivered without the common decency of coming here and showing some respect to the people who fight for the living standards of working people every single day. And that era is now over, Congress. And I would like to thank every one of you who played a role in ending it. Every one of you who took to the streets and the doorsteps of your communities to remove the burden of Tory rule from our shoulders. But even more importantly, I'd like to thank every one of you who held the social fabric of this country together through 14 years where it came under relentless attack. The cleaners, the carers, the nurses, physios, shop workers, drivers, builders, cooks, posties, farmers, retailers, warehouse workers, technicians, teachers and teaching assistants, I could go on, the working people who got us through the pandemic and so much more, the backbone of this country. Because Congress, the chance we now have, the opportunity to rebuild Britain, that hope is here because of those efforts. So thank you all for everything you do and have done for our country. But now, the job of rebuilding begins. And I have to level with you. As I did on the streets in Downing Street just over 2 months ago, this will take a while. It will be hard. But just as we had to do the hard graft of change in our party, now we have to roll up our sleeves and change our country. And Congress, the light of a fairer Britain, a more prosperous, secure and dynamic country is at the end of the tunnel. That doesn't mean that it's easy to get there. The Tories knew it would be like this. That's why they called the election early. And we saw, as I'm sure you all did, just how ruthlessly they were prepared to salt the earth of Britain's future, serving themselves to the bitter end. And that's why we were so clear and specific about the first steps in our election campaign. We didn't want to go further because we knew there would be new problems, unknown problems, when we finally saw the books. And with trust in politics so low, I had to be honest with the British public when I was standing in the full sunlight of democracy. I owed it to them to promise only what we knew we could deliver. And yet, Congress, even in our worst fears, we didn't think it would be this bad. The pollution in our rivers, the overcrowding in our prisons, so much of our crumbling public realm, universities, councils, the care system, all even worse than we expected. Millions of pounds wasted disgracefully on a Rwanda scheme that they knew would never work. Politics reduced to an expensive, divisive, noisy performance. A game to be played, not the force that can fundamentally change the lives of those that we represent. And Congress, The bill for that performance is now in. And I'm afraid if we don't take action, it's a cheque that will bounce. Britain left with a social black hole and a financial one. £22 billion this year alone. Concealed not just from us, not just from you and working people, but even from the Office of Budget Responsibility, the watchdog that is there precisely to protect working people. Now, no one in this room wants to hear such a gloomy forecast. I get that. I don't want to be saying it either. It's not how any government would want to begin its work. Yet, given what happened with Liz Truss, given that, unlike 14 years ago, borrowing costs are high and the risk of inflation is real, I owe working people the respect of economic stability, a responsibility not to be reckless with their money. That is the mandate we have won. And we will deliver this by fixing the foundations of our country, taking those first steps towards the long-term change that we need. That is how this government will return wealth creation to Britain, to the service of working people. Because Congress, make no mistake, that is the opportunity here. This is not a project that will be content to achieve a good few Labour things and leave the broader economic settlement untouched. No, the crisis we've inherited means we must go deep into the marrow of our institutions, rewrite the rules of our economy, fix the foundations so we can build a new home. A country where growth not only comes from the enterprise of working people, but where growth serves the interests of working people. Living standards rising, not just because we're redistributing from prosperous parts of the country, but because we're growing the economy in every community. That is our mission. Who is growth for? Who does it serve? The right answer, the Labour answer, the British answer must be working people, and that is the change that we stand for. But there's nothing new in this. It's the purpose of the Labour Party now and always. And throughout this government, no matter the storm, the service of working people will be our anchor, our still point in a turning world, the people we hold in our mind's eye as we face up to the daunting challenge of our inheritance and secure our mission on growth. That's why we've already reformed the remit of the Low Pay Commission to take account of the cost of living and deliver a real living wage. It's why we've launched a new National Wealth Fund to invest in the critical infrastructure our industries need and drive growth into every community. It's why we've unlocked solar and onshore wind, started bringing rail back into public ownership, committed to a proper industrial strategy, switched on great British energy, and begun, in partnership with you and business, the biggest levelling up of workers' rights in a generation. And let's be really clear about why we need this New Deal. It's because this government is committed to driving up living standards, improving productivity, and working in partnership with workers. And Congress, as part of that New Deal, let me again be crystal clear. We will repeal the 2016 Trade Union Act, get rid of minimum service level legislation, end the cheap and vindictive attacks on this movement, and turn the page on politics as united front once and for all. And Congress, this is the opportunity of power. It was hard won and hard fought for. I want to thank the General Secretary for his role in that. Paul has always been a campaigner, a force of nature. And across the movement, there are people without whom we could not have done this. Too many to thank here, but they know who they are. Because election victories don't fall from the sky, certainly not for the Labour Party. But as well as your support, we also had to change. This election would not have been won if we had not changed. We have the chance now to repair our public services because we changed the Labour Party. We have the chance to make work pay because we changed the Labour Party. We have the chance to deliver for working people, young people, vulnerable people, the poorest in our society, because we changed the Labour Party. So when I say country first, party second, that isn't a slogan. It's the guiding principle of everything this government will do. We ran as a changed Labour Party, and we will govern as a changed Labour Party. And so I make no apologies for any of the decisions we've had to take to begin the work of change. And no apologies to those still stuck in the 1980s who believe that unions and business can only stand at odds, leaving working people stuck in the middle, who cannot see that this country needs a new path on growth. People who describe policies that give working people more security, more protection, more power and dignity at work, or even the fundamentals of industrial strategy, which is common across the world, as anti-growth. Let me tell you what is anti-growth. An economy where real wages stagnated for 15 years. That's anti-growth. An economy where productivity keeps on flatlining. That's anti-growth. An economy where the state of our public services prevents people going to work because they're ill. That's anti-growth. And so I won't take lectures from the Tories or others who complain every time this government tries to undo the damage that they have done, clinging desperately to the failed model of the past. And nor will I take seriously the complaints of people who had their time, faced with the same difficult problems, chose to run away from the responsibility of fixing them. A party that allowed the politics of easy answers and distraction to become their comfort zone, rather than face the responsibility and reality of government. That has changed. Let me tell you, I see the nurses, the teaching assistants, the carers who can't afford to get their boiler fixed or buy their kids a new school uniform. I see them. I see the public sector demoralised, burnt out in some places, gripped by a recruitment and retention crisis that holds back your ability to do what we all believe in, the service of working people. I see all that. And so I can guarantee this is not and never will be a government that will sit around the table with you and tell you that black is white. But I do have to make clear, from a place of respect, that this government will not risk its mandate for economic stability under any circumstances. And with tough decisions on the horizon, pay will inevitably be shaped by that. I owe you that candour. And I'll tell you why. It's because, as was so painfully exposed by the last government, when you lose control of the economy, it's working people who pay the price. And I'll never let that happen under a Labour government. And that's why I call now, as before the election, for the politics of partnership, with us in government, with business, and most importantly of all, with working people. Now that sounds very straightforward and attractive, but I'll tell you this, it's much more difficult. Alongside collaboration, it also requires compromise. It demands that we work through our disagreements and with those who have a different perspective. Partnership is a more difficult way of doing politics. I don't deny that. I know there's a clarity in the old ways, the zero-sum ways, business versus worker, management versus union, public versus private, pick your side, to the victor the spoils. Nonetheless, I say to everyone now, and I think many of you already know this, that kind of politics is not what the British people want. When I say to them that our policies will be pro-business and pro-worker, they don't look at me as if I'm deluded. No, they see that as the most ordinary, sensible thing in the world. I know there will always be disputes. Of course there will. But in all seriousness, there is a mood of change in the business world, a growing understanding of the importance of good work and the shared self-interest that comes from treating the workforce with respect and dignity, the productivity gain of fairness. And Congress, that is an opportunity to be grasped. Business leaders are not knocking on my door saying they want to rip up employee rights. They don't tell me the problems they face will be solved by coming for the trade unions. They want fair taxes, high skills, and the long-term ability to invest. And that chimes precisely with what trade unions up and down the country tell me they also want. Working people want good companies to make profits, attract investment, and create good jobs. And Congress, in a way, that is why the Tory argument on trade unions no longer finds the same audience. The British people are not interested in those tired old tropes. This isn't the 1980s. The mood is for partnership, and not just on pay, on everything, to turn around our NHS, give our children the start in life that they deserve, make our public services fit for the future, unlock the potential of our clean energy. We have to treat this as an opportunity to come together. We're in power now. This is our chance, Congress. Common cause of national renewal. And so as we rewrite those rules of our economy, as we drag this country back to the service of working people, this is a chance that must be taken. Because rules written in the ink of partnership will be more durable and long-lasting, whoever is in power. So it's time to turn the page. Business and unions, the private and public sector, united by a common cause to rebuild our public services and grow our economy in a new way. Higher growth, higher wages, higher productivity, the shared purpose of partnership, the path through the mess the Tories made, and onwards to national renewal. That is the road we are on, Congress, and we won't turn away from it. We will keep to the course of change, reject the snake oil of the easy answer, fix the foundations of our economy and build a new Britain, more secure, more prosperous, more dynamic and fairer. Wealth created in every community, a country renewed and returned, calmly but with confidence, to the service of working people. Thank you, Congress. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Congress.
Keir, it was great to hear from you as Prime Minister, and you can see from the reaction of Congress that you have the support of the trade union movement in the tasks you've set out. Congress, as I indicated earlier, the Prime Minister has agreed to take questions, and we will be taking questions in batches of 3, and I invite Paul Novak to introduce our first questions.
Thanks, President, and thanks to the Prime Minister not only for his address but agreeing to take questions as well. We are going to take 6 questions from the conference floor, and I'll take those questions in batches of 3. So our first question from this side of the room comes from Julia, a social care worker from the North West and a member of Unison. Julia.
Thank you. Thank you, President. Thank you, Congress. Thank you, Prime Minister. Welcome to our town.
Thank you.
This is the first question of the day. Unison is usually supportive for Labour commitment to National Care Service and fair pay agreement for care workers. Social care has suffered terribly for the past 14 years under the Tory. And tackling it, the crisis begins with the workforce. We know very well that far-reaching reform cannot happen overnight. But can the Prime Minister reassess Labour long-term commitment to a national care service and getting a fair agreement up and running a bit quicker? Because care worker and support worker, they are suffering up and down the country, including in this room. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Our second question is from David, who's a Unite Executive Council member who works in the health sector. David.
So we have, of course, been listening to the Prime Minister speaking there at the Trade Union Congress. Andrew Pearce is there in Brighton. Andrew, I don't know whether you can hear me, but I would love to know your reaction to that speech. He looks very much at home in that environment, doesn't he? And it was rather reconciliatory, trying to bring together the people in the room who want to fight for workers' rights, but being clear that he has to balance the books. And I thought that was a pretty good speech.
Yeah, but the reaction in the room, though, again, it fits in with what I've felt since I've been here, Bev, 24 hours. It's curiously low-key. I thought there'd be much more excitement in the air, palpable almost, because this is the first Labour Prime Minister at a TUC conference since 2009. The applause at the end, they stood up, but they were polite rather than ecstatic, because not everybody in the audience wants to hear this message, that actually there's going to have to be some painful decisions. Not least, of course, one they're voting on in the Commons this afternoon over winter fuel. But he's not a great orator, let's be honest, but it was well crafted, and it's very short, which I always approve of, as you know. And, of course, he's got to get back to the Commons pretty quickly. And he's now taking questions, which is quite a clever thing to do, because he won't know, generally, quite what those questions are going to be, who's going to ask what.
OK. Oh, that's interesting. I would have thought they'd be quite carefully curated and crafted to hand him easy questions maybe on the day. Yeah,
and if that was at a Labour Party conference, I'd say without a doubt. But at the TUC, a lot of TUC members are not in unions even affiliated to the Labour Party. So I think he'll know broadly the area, but I mean there could well be a hostile question. But he'll be able to deal with it. Look, he's a clever lawyer, isn't he? He can handle that. He does PMQs every week.
Actually, you're right, Andrew, because it was a very balanced speech, wasn't it? Because he was very clear that there's no silver bullet for the trade unions and they shouldn't get their hopes up too high. But similarly, the public should also not get their hopes up too high. How long can he carry on, though, Andrew, with this rhetoric of this pessimism that everything is somebody else's fault? At which point is he going to seize the mantle and say, well, I'm left with this, but we are going to make it work?
I think he's got to think a bit. I think he's got to rethink this strategy, because I think part of the pessimism emanating from Number 10 is reflected in the mood here, because it is low key, it is downbeat. And I was just looking at some letters in some of the letters page of the Times today saying, "Come on, Prime Minister, we need a vision, we need a strategy." When Tony Blair arrived on the scene, he was bursting with optimism, bursting with ideas. We had Blairism, we had sound bites like "tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime." There was a genuine sense of optimism. Thatcher, when she came in, she had a story to tell. Clement Attlee, who was the great reforming Labour Prime Minister, he inherited Britain broken by 6 years of the Second World War, but had an optimistic story to tell. So I think he needs to look back in history, Starmer, and think more positively about telling us, giving us something more to look forward to, rather than all the negative stuff about, oh, that wicked old Tory government. Although I have to say, Bev, when he did stick the boot in on the Tories, that probably got him the loudest cheer.
Oh, really? The vindictiveness is still alive and well there, Andrew, then this morning. The three words that he used repeatedly about the country, and perhaps we should give him some credit, this maybe is how he's trying to change the narrative, is he said he wants a secure, a prosperous and a dynamic UK, a dynamic Great Britain, but not an awful lot, of course. Maybe this isn't the time to say how he's going to make that happen. And the other thing that struck me was this idea that, you know, understandably it's Trade Union Congress, about working people. We are the party of the working people. That's not going to be much help to pensioners who've already done their working.
Absolutely, and there was very little in that speech to give any comfort to pensioners, and there's a growing suspicion on the Tory benches that the reason we've got the winter fuel allowance, OK, Rachel Reeves says she's got to plug a very large black hole in the public finances she inherited from the Tory government, but of course most people over the age of 63, or more people over the age of 63, vote Tory than any other party. Is this Labour government punishing Tory voters? Now that's a pretty serious charge to make, but if you talk to union leaders here, all they're talking about is the workers who they represent. They're not talking about the pensioners. But I'm hoping a little later, when we get the vote this afternoon in the Commons, to speak to people here from the Pensioners Convention who are here, and let me tell you, they're very, very angry about the cut to winter fuel, and thrust a piece of paper in front of me showing me the Prime Minister's salary, Rachel Reeves' salary, the Chancellor's, and MP's salary, and this very feisty lady from the Pensioners Convention said, well, none of us are on anything like that, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. OK, Andrew, thank you. We'll leave you there at the TUC. We're joined in the studio still by GBNews' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and Piers Pottinger. Gentlemen, let me come to you first. Nigel, what did you make of his speech?
I think Andrew was right, that it was a strangely muted response from the delegates at the TUC conference. They applauded quite enthusiastically about repealing the Trade Union Act and anti-trade union laws and getting rid of minimum service levels, but that was about the only point where they got really excited. The rest of it, I think, as you've just been saying, it was a bit of a downbeat speech. And there is a point where you can't keep blaming the Tories for what's happened. You've got to say what you're going to do. I think that point comes after the budget, because that's going to be pretty depressing too.
Yeah. Piers, let me come to you. There's something about his sort of rather paternal tone which can verge on the patronising a little bit, sort of infantilising your audience a bit, but he does sometimes sound... It's very sort of fatherly. I will look after you, but you have to trust me with some tough love.
Yeah, well, I certainly don't trust him. And, I mean, he kept saying that the Labour Party had changed. Yep, it's just gone back to its old shape. I mean, repealing the Trade Union Act is a disgraceful thing to do. It just puts his paymasters... Let's not forget, he was talking to his paymasters there, and he's just playing to their tune. He's also going to penalise working people, this great phrase he keeps using. But working people have savings, they have investments. Some of them have a car, some of them have a home, and on every area they're going to be penalised by this government. And at one point he talked about redistributing from prosperous parts of the country. What does that mean? Taking money away from something that's doing well, which means it'll stop doing well, and moving it somewhere else. That's just crazy. Well, he also talked about productivity gain of fairness. That again shows how, like most of the cabinet, he has no understanding of business at all. None of the cabinet actually worked in business. You've got a couple of lawyers, and the rest of them were just Labour apparatchiks. There's no understanding of British business in this cabinet at all, and that speech was certainly lacklustre. It was actually, I thought it went down like a lead balloon. I mean, you'd have thought he's delivered for his paymasters. You thought they'd be cheering him. They weren't, and so I think he's building up, and he's already got the first sign of rebellion today with the winter fuel allowance vote. Admittedly, it'll only be small and token, but nevertheless, I think he could end up with, because there comes a point where he can't keep giving the paymasters more and more money, because even he realises that'll bust the country completely.
Wouldn't you be more worried if they were on their feet, giving him a standing ovation.
No, I would have expected it. I must say, I would have expected it to be much more celebratory than it was.
But isn't that a good thing?
Given
the powers that the unions have.
But I would have thought he must be slightly worried by this. And the other point is that most of his speech, of course, was simply an attack again on the Conservatives in the past. There must come a point where he says, OK, enough is enough. Let's talk about the future. And let's give some people in this country some hope of some prosperity and growth that he keeps talking about with there's no way we're going to get the growth at the moment because he isn't doing anything to create growth. In fact, it's the reverse.
OK, well, I'm sure it's round up our audience as well. Nigel Nelson, Piers Pottinger, thank you for now. Let us know what you thought. gbnews.com/your say. First, though, the very latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 11:30 and the top story this hour. Well, as we've been hearing, Sir Keir Starmer has been taking to the stage at the Trades Union Congress in Bristol, warning that economic challenges will shape future pay deals and said that tough decisions lie ahead. Well, as the first Prime Minister to address the TUC since Gordon Brown, he thanked those who ended what he called the burden of Tory rule in this year's general election. But he warned that rebuilding Britain will be a difficult and long-term task, pointing to a £22 billion black hole he says was left by the Conservatives. Around 1,700 prisoners in England and Wales have been released early today as the government's attempting to tackle overcrowding in jails. The prison's watchdog is warning some released prisoners could reoffend or end up homeless because of inadequate preparation. But despite concerns from victims and charities, Downing Street is defending the move, saying it's vital to prevent unchecked criminality caused by lack of jail space. Well, our reporter Anna Riley's been speaking to one inmate who's been released this morning from HMP Hull.
Horrible, but the staff they're pretty good. Because I don't like it in there, but the staff look after me. And I have bad mental health problems, so they didn't put me in a double cell. The rats were massive. The hygiene in there needs to be better.
MPs are set to vote later on a controversial government plan to remove winter fuel payments from most pensioners. It is being defended by Labour as a tough decision to address that £22 billion deficit, and will see around 10 million people lose up to £300 in support. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, argues the move is necessary to fix public finances after what she calls reckless Conservative spending. But Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride told us he thinks Labour are picking the pockets of pensioners.
This is a choice. They took a choice when they first came in to give in to their trade union paymasters when it came to wage settlement, so 22% for the junior doctors, 14% for the train drivers and so on. And it is entirely wrong that they should be doing those kind of things on the backs of some of the most vulnerable pensioners up and down the country.
And the public inquiry into the crimes of convicted child serial killer nurse Lucy Letby has begun today at Liverpool Town Hall. The investigation is scrutinising how Letby, now serving 15 life sentences, was able to murder and to harm babies at the Countess of Chester Hospital despite repeated warnings to hospital bosses. This week, opening statements will be heard, with evidence expected to continue until December. Our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper is outside the inquiry for us.
Its primary aim, first and foremost, will be to try and get some answers for the victims' families, but it'll also take in factors like the response of Letby's colleagues from the Countess of Chester Hospital, from the wider NHS. We know from the trial that there were whistleblowers from the very beginning. So, for example, it will ask why those concerns weren't investigated to begin with.
Those are the latest headlines from the GB Newsroom for now. I'll be back with you at the top of the hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick look at the markets as they stand just after 11:30. The pound will buy you $1.3081 and €1.1854 euros. The price of gold, £1,912 and 1 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,217 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. An area of cloud and rain moves south today. Behind that, blustery showers follow on and much colder Arctic winds for the next few days. Low pressure is pushing through northern Scotland into the North Sea. This weather front is clearing its way southwards, and that contains a fair amount of cloud across central and southern parts of England, mid and south Wales. Outbreaks of rain on that front, although the rain is tending to fizzle out as the afternoon progresses. 1 or 2 showers to the south of it, a lot of cloud, brighter skies across northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, but a cold wind starts to arrive, and that wind will be particularly strong for the northeast of Scotland. 50-60 mile-per-hour wind gusts could cause disruption, and the rain for Shetland turning heavier and more persistent through the day could also lead to a few issues. Now, by the evening, the rain is across South Wales, South West England, into the home counties, but it is clearing through. North Wales, North Midlands, Northern England, plenty of sunshine actually before the sun goes down. Northern Ireland, Scotland, prone to a lot of showers, and that strong wind continuing to strengthen as the afternoon and evening arrive. Now, the rain persists for Shetland into the evening, but eventually turns more showery overnight, 60 to 80 millimetres possible. And there'll be persistent showers rolling into the northwest of Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England and parts of North Wales overnight. Clear skies elsewhere and a colder night for sleeping, certainly compared with recent nights. Most places in the single figures. Now we start Wednesday with plenty of bright skies in the south and the east, but further showers arriving into the north and northwest. And that's the way it continues through the day. Most of the day will be dry towards the southwest, but elsewhere there'll be a lot of showers coming through, a brisk and gusty wind, and it's going to feel cold in that wind.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News,
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 11:38. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce in Brighton. So on the day where 1,750 prisoners are being released early, the Justice Secretary is facing questions live in the House of Commons. We wouldn't necessarily take this live, but it feels significant today. Here is Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood taking questions on this issue.
The debate in July around early prisoner release. The impact assessment produced suggests that there'd be 5,500 less prison places than planned for, due to make the capital savings that were discussed at the time. When I raised this with the Secretary of State, she did say that this would be under review. Can she now confirm that it's the government's intention to cut back prison places by 5,500 over the medium and long term?
The Right Honourable Lady will know that I've committed to publishing a 10-year capacity strategy. There are also live discussions as part of the budget and spending review process. We have committed to delivering the shortfall of 14,000 places in our prison system that the previous government failed to deliver. That is a commitment we have given. Those conversations are live conversations. I will report to the House in due course, but we will be publishing a 10-year capacity strategy before the end of the year.
Richard Chase. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Secretary of State explain why, when there are some 10,000 foreign criminals blocking up space in our jails? Why aren't they being removed and deported, simultaneously saving the British taxpayer billions of pounds every year and having the support of millions of British voters? Here.
They are being deported. They will continue to be deported. Nothing will change as far as deportation of foreign national offenders is concerned. But the inheritance that we had from the previous government meant we had to take further additional measures. The answer won't come from deportation of foreign national offenders alone, but it is very much part of the picture.
We come to the Shadow Secretary, Adega.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under the early release scheme that the Secretary of State, designed the detail of starting today, how many people will be eligible to be released at the 40% point who have been sentenced for offences, for example, under Section 20 GBH, Section 47 ABH of the Offence Against the Person Act 1861, both of which carry a maximum sentence of 5 years, but more often a sentence will be awarded that is less than 5 years?
Well, the Shadow Lord Chancellor will know that we have made important exclusions to the design of this policy, and all those who have committed serious offences, who have been sentenced to 4 years or more, will be excluded from this policy. He will know that I will not be able to give details on the specific mix of offences per offender, but those offences that should be included that relate to serious violence or sexual offences have been excluded from this policy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful.
Well, that was the Justice Secretary taking questions in the House of Commons, and of course it is a significant day because of these prisoners who are being released early. Let's talk now to retared prison Governor Vanessa Frake. Good morning, Vanessa. Thank you for joining us. Morning, good to see you again. So Shabana Mahmood there, justifying the decisions that have been made here to allow people to leave the prisons, saying very clearly that they took a call on which prisoners could be released. When you look at some of the pictures of people coming out today, we had a very powerful, I think, interview that we've been showing clips of one gentleman being released who, with the best will in the world, looks a little unprepared for life on the outside. What will the challenges be like for people now who are prisoners who are being released with no support network?
I presume you're talking about the prisoner who had clearly had mental health problems, and unfortunately, you know, he is one of many people who probably shouldn't be in prison. You know, I'm sure, I don't know what his offence was, but there are several people in prison with mental health issues who shouldn't be there. Support, I would hope that with him in particular, that it has been gone through with him, the support measures that are out. I hope that he's has been in touch with one of the charities that work within prisons with regard homes, if he hasn't got one. Certainly, I hope that he is aware of where his probation officer is and who to report to. And certainly, upon his release, his licence will have been gone through with him by a senior manager who will have made sure that he understands the condition of his licence. So are people freed from prison, Vanessa, with no home to go to? Or are they always connected with at least a charity and a forwarding address to all intents and purposes? On the main, there is many charities that work within prisons who help with homelessness. You know, we all know that homelessness is connected to repeat offending, but there are times where this doesn't happen, and it shouldn't happen, but it does happen. You know, it's part of, I saw one prison, I think 30% of prisoners released over the last 12 months had no homes. Well, that's far too high. And it's something that should be completely looked at, because there is a link to homelessness and repeat offending. When you are released early, like these guys are being today, does it mean that you've not prepared to leave in a sense, is what I'm saying? Is if you know that your release date is going to be in 12 months' time, you might have something in place, maybe, who you're going to live with in that time. But to be released early like this must have taken some of these people by surprise. I wouldn't have thought so because, I mean, the government announced this early release scheme pretty much as soon as they won the general election. So they would have had immediately that was announced. You can bet that there was communication from the Home Office down to every single prison saying, right, sort out who is going to fall into this category. And recalculate their release dates. And once their release dates were recalculated, they'd have been informed straight away. So it shouldn't have been like, oh, good morning, you're going home today.
Yeah. OK, all right, thank you, Vanessa. Vanessa Freight there, retired prisons governor. We're going to go back to the TUC now. Chris Hope is with the General Secretary of the TUC, Paul Novak.
Hi, Bev. I'm now with Paul Novak, who's the TUC's General Secretary. Paul Novak, the reaction to that speech, I thought quite subdued in the hall. He had some tough words on future pay settlements.
He did have some, I think, a sort of a stark assessment of what's happened to the UK economy. But I actually thought he had a warm reception today, and you'd expect that. This is the first Labour Prime Minister, in fact, the first Prime Minister of any description to speak to a TUC Congress in 15 years. And he made it very clear he wants to work with unions and with business to get the UK economy growing again. But crucially, from our delegates' perspectives, also see wages rising and living standards improve as well.
Do your members trust Keir Starmer? They trust him to deliver in the future on pay and welfare?
I think that trust is there. I mean, one of the commitments the government made was to deliver its new deal for workers in full with an employment bill within the first 100 days of the Labour government. The government is absolutely on track to deliver that commitment. The Prime Minister very clear today, that package of measures, a ban on 0 hours contracts, an end to fire and rehire, day one employment rights is coming. And frankly, for our members, it can't come soon enough.
There was one heckler. She shouted, tax the rich. Is that what you want?
Well, I mean, that was one person out of 600. But hey, you know, we've been calling at the TUC for a long time for a national debate on taxes. And
on wealth particularly.
Yeah, and the Prime Minister said himself last week he expects those with the broadest shoulders to do the heaviest lifting. And we think it's right that we should think about how we tax wealth in this country as well as workers, and how, for example, the online retailers pay their fair share of tax compared to those on the high streets.
That's issue of business rates, of course, but we are taxed heavily, the highest rate since the Second World War. How much more can we bear?
Well, I just don't think that we've got a tax system that reflects the changing nature of the UK economy. You know, dividends rose 3 times faster than wages in the last period. We're very good at taxing work, we're less good at taxing wealth, and that's what we think the government needs to look again at.
In the question and answer session now with the Prime Minister, he was asked about the 2-child benefit cap, a key issue, I think, for many Labour supporters. He said it can't be solved by one adjustment to welfare. Were you pleased by that answer, or were you disappointed?
Well, listen, the government set up its child poverty task force. I hope as a result of that task force, that 2-child benefit cap goes. But I think the Prime Minister is also right. Universal credit is a bust system, and it's not just the cap that's a problem. And crucially, we need to get people earning more at work. I mean, making work pay is one of the government's mantras, and it's absolutely right. Why should the government subsidise low-paying employers? It's time for employers to step up to the plate and pay staff decently.
I'm going to ask you about our colleague Nigel Farage. He presents on the channel in the evenings. He's an MP, leader of Reform UK. You talked about him in your speech yesterday. You said he wasn't a friend of the working class. He would argue he was, given the support Reform got the election.
Well, clearly we've got a Labour Prime Minister talking to our Congress who had a 174-seat majority, so I think he can claim to have the support of the working class. I think Nigel Farage is a fraud, and I'm sorry, I know he's a colleague of yours, but I think he's a fraud, and I think basically he tries to breed division in our communities, and what this country needs actually is to bring people together, that shared sense of national purpose, to rebuild our public services, to get the economy growing, and I don't think that Nigel, I'm afraid, represents the people of Clacton, all working class people, effectively.
Well, they voted him in Clacton, and he definitely wouldn't say he's a fraud. He's speaking up for people who haven't got a voice in the UK at the moment.
Well, I think it's a very divisive voice, and it's one actually that we want to send a positive message about what we can do as a country working together rather than sowing division.
And just finally, I think it feels a bit subdued here, but you're saying that's the kind of acceptance. There's none of the kind of hail a conquering hero that we may have seen in '97 with Tony Blair.
Well, I think Trade Union Congress is always different than, say, for example, a Labour Party conference. I mean, these are people representing millions of people up and down the country in different workplaces, and so, what they want to hear from the Prime Minister, I think they've got a positive message today, a challenging message in some ways. We know the big economic challenges that the government faces, but I think a lot of goodwill in the whole to work with the government to deliver the change the country needs.
Well, Paul Novak, thank you for joining us. You got it back on the stage at the conference.
Sorry,
but thank you for joining us. Great to see you. Thank you, Paul. Paul Novak there. He's the TUC's General Secretary, Bev.
Thank you, Chris. Really interesting to hear that. And I'm glad you held him to account over the attack on Nigel Farage yesterday. And I think he called him a public school boy. I mean, it was very personal, wasn't it? Yeah, say hi from me. It was a very personal attack on Nigel Farage yesterday. This is the challenge, isn't it, that the Labour Party have now going forward, is the appeal to those people who want to vote for reform, and in fact did vote for reform, and the people who agree with what Paul Novak is saying there in terms of where he sees the working person's vote go.
That's right. I mean, there's no way that Farage would say he's a fraud, and he is representing the people of Clacton, despite what Paul Novak says. And that's right. I mean, who is speaking for the working class in this country, the working people? You know, millions of people did vote for Reform UK who were supportive of a Labour Party, and that's certainly where Nigel Farage thinks he can get support going into the next election in 2028, 2029. But he's seen as a symbol, I think, of division, maybe because of some of the remarks after those killings in Southport. That could be what Paul Novak is referring to. But I think that Nigel Farage certainly would contest that. I think there's a debate right now and a battle being fought out in politics, Bev, over who is the voice, the authentic voice of the working class in this country.
I was really struck in Keir Starmer's speech how he was talking about the dignity and power to workers, actually, which I think is a powerful message. We live in a time where we've seen the biggest transfer of wealth in the last 4 years. We do often feel we don't feel it, it's a fact that the gap between the rich and the poor is getting wider. And Keir Starmer can make something of that message, but he has to pitch it right and not sound patronising, which he sometimes does.
He can do, can't he? But that's his nature. He's quite a serious Prime Minister. I mean, I thought when he talked about the opportunity of power, he talked about putting service before party. Now, some would say those big pay rises offered earlier this year at the expense, apparently, of cuts to pensioners and this fuel benefit was surprising. And that was a choice made by the Labour Party, quite divisive. It was striking, I think, also, Bev, that this issue of this winter fuel payment cut in November, £200 for those under 80, £300 for those over 80. That was not raised by anybody in the hall. We heard about tough choices from Keir Starmer, but nothing more than that. He's now on the way back to London to face his MPs and try and limit the damage for any rebellion, any withdrawal support for that measure. But I think that was quite telling. I think this TUC conference, as much as the MPs, I was outside the Parliamentary Labour Party last night, that meeting. I think they're very clear they want to try and give Sir Keir Starmer a chance to get this bad news out of the way. But the question they've got for the Labour Party is will this benefit cut for so many pensioners become the albatross around the neck of this government in the same way that I remember those cuts, the tuition fees controversy with the Lib Dems. I think it could be a problem going forward for this government.
Yeah, OK, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us there from the TUC conference in Brighton. Emily and Tom are here to tell us what's coming up on the show. Hello, both.
Hello, hello. Well, as Chris was just saying, Keir Starmer is currently on a train hurtling towards the House of Commons, where he's going to have the biggest test of his premiership so far. It's not just the opposition within the House of Commons, though that is a broad coalition of many parties opposing the Labour Party. It's also the coalition of people outside the House of Commons. I think we're going to feel that in the House of Commons. That debate is starting this afternoon on our show.
Yeah. Yes, meanwhile, all of these prisoners being released, Charlie Peters reporting there's a party atmosphere outside HMP Wandsworth. How worried should we be right now?
Seen that footage. Do stay to watch it, because they are delighted.
Lifelong Labour voters now, eh?
Yes.
That's what some of them are saying. Crazy. This is not good for the Prime Minister, not good for the rest of us, I would hazard a guess. We've also got a lot of live events too. We're going to see the Prince of Wales, first time since they released that beautiful video message from the Princess of Wales, and also Anthony Blinken is in town. How will David Lammy get on with him?
The US Secretary of State coming over just days after the UK put that semi-restriction on exporting arms to Israel. It's going to be a testy press conference. We're going to take that live, because it could be we're seeing quite a bit of animosity between the US and the UK right now.
Let me ask what you thought of the video, the Middletons, the Wales' video, the little clip. Did you like it?
It's quite impressive. I was surprised it was so long, but it was very touching. I mean, it's interesting to see that side of them, isn't it?
I think we needed to see something.
And it's wonderful news for us.
It is good news. You just wonder whether they caved to the pressure to compete with the Sussex.
Oh, no,
Emily and Tom will be here from midday. That's it from Britain's Newsroom. I'm covering for Michelle Dewberry tonight at 6.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. An area of cloud and rain moves south today. Behind that, blustery showers follow on and much colder Arctic winds for the next few days. Low pressure is pushing through northern Scotland into the North Sea. This weather front is clearing its way southwards, and that contains a fair amount of cloud across central and southern parts of England, mid and south Wales. Outbreaks of rain on that front, although the rain is tending to fizzle out as the afternoon progresses. 1 or 2 showers to the south of it, a lot of cloud. Brighter skies across northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, but a cold wind starts to arrive, and that wind will be particularly strong for the northeast of Scotland. 50, 60 mile-per-hour wind gusts could cause disruption, and the rain for Shetland turning heavier and more persistent through the day could also lead to a few issues. Now, by the evening, the rain is across South Wales, southwest England, into the home counties, but it is clearing through. North Wales, North Midlands, northern England, plenty of sunshine, actually, before the sun goes down. Northern Ireland, Scotland, prone to a lot of showers, and that strong wind continuing to strengthen as the afternoon and evening arrive. Now, the rain persists for Shetland into the evening, but eventually turns more showery overnight. 60 to 80 millimetres possible, and there'll be persistent showers rolling into the northwest of Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England and parts of North Wales overnight. Clear skies elsewhere and a colder night for sleeping, certainly compared with recent nights, most places in the single figures. Now we start Wednesday with plenty of bright skies in the south and the east, but further showers arriving into the north and northwest. And that's the way it continues through the day. Most of the day will be dry towards the southwest, but elsewhere there'll be a lot of showers coming through, a brisk and gusty wind, and it's going to feel cold in that wind.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's an incredible £36,000 to be won in the Great British Giveaway. That's like having an extra £3,000